Welcome back, or welcome if you're just joining us. It's the France 24 debate. We're talking 2 months after the Paris terror attacks on what's changed, how public policy has to be reviewed, and, of course, how to counter the radicalization message. With us from Munich, Mubin Sheikh, co-author of the book Undercover Jihadi, where he explains how he infiltrated the so-called Toronto 18 as an undercover agent for Canadian intelligence back in 2005. From London, Haras Rafiq, managing director of the Quilliam Foundation. Haras, remind us what the Quilliam Foundation is.
Sorry, I'm still laughing from something that was said earlier on, that the Quilliam Foundation essentially could be dangerous because we've got former extremists and jihadis. But yeah, the Quilliam Foundation basically is a think tank and an organisation that counters extremism and from a mainly Islamist perspective, and promotes human rights and equality for people to be able to actually promote the values that we would believe, all believe in, I guess, in a liberal secular democracy. And Quilliam Foundation has been set up by former extremists, and we have a number of former jihadists who work in the organisation and now are doing a lot of work both in the prevention and actual de-radicalisation and rehabilitation of others who have gone down that path.
All right, we're also joined by crime and courts reporter Thierry Lévesque. Welcome back. Welcome back as well to Christophe Naudin, criminologist, and as well as advisor and trainer for the French National Police Force. Let's talk about the news at hand. We have four people who are under, I guess the French term is under formal examination. Mm-hmm. We have another three who are being questioned as we speak by police. This for helping the kosher grocery store killer Amédy Coulibaly. Perhaps they are accessories. We're looking at it. A fourth person, her name has not been revealed, but we know she's a female gendarme, Emmanuelle, her first name. She has now been released. The 34-year-old Brittany native reportedly converted to Islam 2 years ago, suspended from active duty in the northern Paris suburb of Rosny-sous-Bois after reports she passed letters to her boyfriend in prison. She is, her boyfriend, by the way, one of the three, still being questioned. Raises a lot of gray areas here. How many people were actually accessories to the Paris terror attacks? We still don't know.
We don't know. We have no idea. And that's the problem. We know that there is probably a huge number of people involved, you know, in those attacks, or a huge number of people who are supporting those attacks. And this is very complicated because this new kind of terrorist actually is like a cancer, is inside the society. We are not fighting, you know, overseas. We are fighting in our own society.
Now, the outspoken French criminologist Alain Bauer says there are, at most, several dozen people who are dangerous enough to actually carry out acts of terror. The problem, he says, is we don't know who they are.
Yeah.
Do you agree with that?
Completely.
Thierry Lévesque?
I think nobody knows, actually. That's the problem of terror, and that's the principle of terror actions. Nobody knows what can happen, or who can act. So, but basically, in the 90s, we had in France the so-called Afghan connection, the people who went, French people who went to Afghanistan to become jihadists at this time. At this time, there was some 30, 40, 50%. It was a very, very small number of persons. And now we are speaking about, according to the police and judicial authorities, something more like 1,000 to 1,300, especially jihadists who go to Syria, but also to Yemen, to Africa, because the problem is that the the conflicts involving jihadists are now developing in the whole world. That's the difference with the 90s. So, of course, we have much more persons potentially dangerous, but nobody knows. Actually, perhaps these people only want to fight in Syria or in Africa. Perhaps they don't want to commit actions in France. Nobody knows. That's the problem. And I think the reflection, a society of complete control, which is, to my opinion, impossible. You can never know what can everybody do? That's something unhuman, impossible, and you can create a totalitarian society with this principle.
How about the recipes that Jack Clunan was talking about just before the break, making our intelligence agencies a bit more efficient?
That's on the way in France, because the government has announced that we are going to recruit hundreds of new agents for the intelligence. Of course, we need some more surveillance. But the surveillance must be submitted to judicial authorities or authorization system. You cannot install a state in the state, so some kind of totally powerful agency like the NSA in the States, which has decided and installed total control. It can see your mail, your email, can see my email, can read my phone calls, even if I haven't done anything or haven't done anything to do with this. So I think it must be, to my opinion, severely restricted. It must be developed, of course. We need some more policemen, some more intelligence officers. But this must remain legal and checked by judicial authorities at some point.
Mubin Sheikh, when you think back, as somebody who at one time was militant, did go to war zones, did espouse the cause, and is now who then worked as a mole infiltrating jihadis. When you live your ordinary life, do you see security cameras everywhere and are thinking about potential threats everywhere, or are you fatalistic and just go about your daily business normally?
No, it's in the middle. I mean, you know, in Canada, you're more likely to be killed by a moose than a terrorist. So I look for moose before I look for the terrorists. No, you have to be realistic. I mean, it's a low probability but very high impact, and that's why we're so beholden by it. As your guest was saying, it's the idea that something could happen at any time, anywhere, by any person.
Jack Clunan?
Well, I think everything that's been said thus far I find very, very important, and I think your discussion is a good one. And as soon as we start putting a number out there of people who we think who have gone to Syria to fight, of course, that in the public view says, oh, well, we know everybody. So if France says there's 1,400, then the assumption is that we know all the 1,400. If the United States FBI director says, well, we know there's 200, there's an assumption in the public's mind that we've got everything covered. And those of us on this phone call know that that's not the case. So for me, again, I go back to the issue of practicality. If somebody decides, whether it's in France or Canada or Germany or the United States, that they need to go to Syria to wage jihad, in my mind, given what has happened, knowing full well what's going on in Syria and ISIS's capabilities, we have to decide as republics, you know, is that material support for terrorism? Is it in our best interest to make it illegal for somebody to go and do that? I suspect some people would agree with that. And if it is, and we do know that they come back, well, first of all, do we allow them to come back? And if we do allow them to come back and they have a support network, should we be arresting those people who have provided material support? Whether that's a computer link, whether that's money, whether that's living. I think these are the issues that we have to wrestle with as a very practical matter.
All right, and that brings us squarely to the issue that's been concentrating the minds across the channel in Britain, what to do about those who've gone and you want to bring back. Authorities in the UK insisting now they will not press charges against those 3 teenaged schoolgirls who seem to have run away from home and gone to Syria. Sanam Chantier has the story. All right, we'll bring you that report in a short while. Christophe Nodin, let me ask you your reaction.
I've got several reactions about what we say. First, my French colleague say we have, and that's a good point, of course, we have to train some intelligence agent. Right, I agree with that. Problem is that to train them, it takes several years. You know, you just can't just hire people like that and make them, you know, able to monitor some people. It's a real job, you know, it's a real technical job. It's complicated. That's the first point. Second point, we believe, and I say we believe in France. We have 1,400 people in Syria. That's true. This is the one, those people...
Those 1,400, by the way, are people who've either gone, will be going, or are there?
No, are there in Syria. Why? Because we have...
1,400 who are there now.
Absolutely. Around. Because we have several problems with that. This is the one who makes some phone calls that we intercept, and we are pretty sure, or 100% sure, that they're there. But there is a lot of people who are probably there, and we don't have any proof to say they're there.
So there might be more.
There might be more. There is some other people who are just, you know, at the Syrian-Turkish border. They are just there for us from France. They are in holidays. You know, they are just there to wait the moment that they will be able to come there. And there is another point very interesting.
And to answer Jack Cloonan's question, what do you do with those people when they come home?
It's been decided in France. It's forbidden to go. You can withdraw the passports, and if they go back, it's association de malfaiteurs terroristes. It's a criminal action. It can be. You can press criminal charges. In the French law, it's more or less solved. What the American colleagues.
Except we saw one of those Kouachi brothers who went off to Yemen and no one knew about it.
They begged. Why? Because they changed their identity. Or they are just using, you know, a funny passport to go there. So, in fact, the reality is we don't know everything. And that's the real problem.
What to do about those people?
It's impossible. To know everything is impossible.
Of course.
We must be aware.
But our problem is the threat, you know. If these people come back, and some of them come back to make action in France because they don't want to pursue their jihad in Syria or in Iraq or elsewhere, they are come back in France, and they have orders to do their own jihad here, and this is what they do, and we can't prevent that.
What to do about those that go and then come back? The case of those 3 British schoolgirls concentrating the minds in the UK. That report by Sanam Chantier.
Voicing their anger at the police, the families of 3 British schoolgirls believed to have joined Islamic State militants.
I feel so let down by the police because we gave them everything.
The criticism came during a tense session before Parliament's Home Affairs Committee on Tuesday, after it was revealed that the teenagers were ordered by police not to tell their relatives that a school friend had absconded to Syria in December. The visibly troubled family members also accused police of not acting quickly enough once they reported the girls missing. Although Britain's police chiefs defended their handling of the case, they did issue an apology.
You can only half imagine what a parent is going through at this time. So in that sense, I'm sorry that they're in that situation. I'm also sorry that, you know, the letter that we intended to get to them didn't get through, because clearly that failed.
Friends Khadiza Sultana, 16, Amira Abbas, 15, and Shamima Begum, also 15, travelled to Turkey last month before crossing over into Syria. Their relatives were assured in front of MPs on Tuesday that the 3 would not be treated as criminals if they returned home.
We have no evidence in this case that these 3 girls are responsible for any terrorist offences.
The girls are among some 60 British women who have travelled to the region to join the conflict, including 22 in the last year.
Haris Rafiq, how do you get those 3 girls to come home, and what do you do with them when they come home?
Well, first of all, it's very interesting that somebody who... the British law legislation is very, very clear. Anybody who goes out to, and this is the Terrorism 2006 Act, anybody who goes out to join in a war, in fighting for any terrorist organisation, unless it's a legitimate army that is not in war with Britain, they have broken the law and they can be prosecuted. These 3 girls are minors, and just like in many other criminal cases, there are certain circumstances, certain conditions, certain things that are taken into consideration for adults and minors. We know 2 of them are 15, 1 of them is 16. As of yet, they can be dealt with in a particularly lenient way. But the thing that we have to realise is that the people that will come back from Iraq and Syria will loosely fit into one of 3 categories. They will either come back disillusioned. They may have gone out there expecting one thing, something else is what they found, and they've managed to come out and come back. Or they could come back disturbed. There could be, you know, we see soldiers that have gone through years of training, and when they're in a war zone, in a combat zone, they come back and they suffer from various types of stress, or they could actually be dangerous. They could be people, as we saw with the Belgium jihadist who did the killings and shootings outside the French jihadist who did the shootings outside the Belgium Jewish Museum. So they can loosely, fit into one of these 3 categories. We have to be able to, first of all, make it very, very clear that, because there's no point in having a deterrent if you're not going to enforce it. Anybody who goes out there post ISIL being classified and designated as a terrorist organisation that wants to come back, that will come back, will be arrested and will have to go through the due process and be taken through the criminal process. And if found guilty, that will mean a level of internment. Secondly, anybody who comes back has to be ready and willing to go through some form of ideological assessment, de-radicalisation and rehabilitation with people who have been through this themselves in the past and can spot the signs. Mubin would be a very, very good person to do something of this, something in this area, because he's seen it, he's done it, he's been through it. And then to make a decision. Where I think David Cameron is struggling is that he's actually saying that people who don't agree to these 2 conditions, he won't allow them back into the UK. Now, I think he may have some problems there if anybody was to actually take, I don't know, go over to another part of the EU and take Britain to the EU Court of Human Rights, or even around the whole probability of, is it illegal to actually strip somebody of citizenship? I'm not so sure of the technicalities there, but I think he may well signal. But if the legislation goes through in our Parliament over the next few weeks, which we're expecting to go through, the Home Secretary will have the power to stop British citizens from coming back if they don't agree to those 2 conditions.
Right, that proposed bill does raise the issue of, can you strip someone of their own nationality if they don't have a second one? Thierry Lévesque, the law is different in France.
Yes, it has been a different measure has been adopted just before the Charlie attacks. Actually, France now has the possibility of withdrawing passports to the people suspected of intention to go to Syria. So as a French citizen, you can be barred from leaving your territory if it is suspected. But what is it actually being suspected of? An intention of going to Syria? You know, so again, we come to this danger of having a very wide
Security
measure
versus civil liberties.
who can violate civil rights of persons, because even if a magistrate controls someone being barred from leaving the country, would he dare saying, well, there's not enough in this case, I will leave him go, and finally something happens, so he will be reproached with this. So I think with all these measures, we arrive to the point, is it possible to have a total control on the society? No. And we must be very, very cautious about the preventive measures, about this justice to prevent things to happen. That
right.
In general, it's impossible.
Mubin Sheikh, is it possible to convince those 3 girls to come home and to look at the world in a different way?
You know, I have to admit, I'm very skeptical that, look, if something can be done, then it should be done. The parents can try to appeal to them, but, you know, the other parents have tried this. There was a female that went from Scotland, Aqsa Mahmoud, who we believe is recruiting a lot of other girls. And she didn't care. She said, look, I mean, you can cry, but I'm here, and I'm here to stay. I'm sorry to say, but I think it's too late for those girls. I mean, there are men who want to come back who are not allowed to come back, and men are allowed to travel by themselves. Once the women get there, they are going to be on lockdown. They will not be able to leave. So I'm sorry to say, but I think it's too late for them, and there's nothing really that can be done. But if I could just add, you know, a lot of countries are thinking of options. In Canada, we're also, you know, taking away passports. But then you have the problem of somebody who wants to go and join a terrorist group like ISIS, and you took away their passport, they are going to turn on you, and we've had cases of that. So I would just finally say that if you're going to let people back, I would force them to be publicly exposed. We should let everyone know that they're cooperating with police and intelligence so that they cannot go back again. That even if they did try to go back, they would probably be seen as spies and be executed. That's just one aspect of it. Rehabilitation programs, I do support that, but I take a tougher stance. I'm not so lenient with those people coming back. It's a very, very dangerous thing. We don't even support our troops and soldiers who come back with PTSD. How are we going to do this to marginalized terrorists who are coming back? So very, very difficult situation.
Jack Clunan, there doesn't seem to be a good solution at this point.
No, we always bump up into what we as our respective countries want to be. And I would just simply add this. If you, Paul, and the other members of this phone call were to ask and had the opportunity to ask their heads of state, whether it's Angela Merkel, whether it's David Cameron, whether it's President Hollande or President Obama, I think if we had to ask them what is their #1 priority these days, I honestly believe that they would answer protecting the public. And who would have thought that we would be having these types of discussions, but it's a reality. And it is the responsibility of the head of state to provide public welfare and protection. How you scale it, how you deliver it is the question we're all wrestling with on this phone call. And I think it's a good discussion. And if I'm sitting here listening to my colleagues, I think we always get back to the same position. If you demonstrate a willingness to go and fight, and you return to your home country, whether you're disillusioned, you got a case of dysentery, and you didn't think it's what you thought it was, you've really made a decision in your own mind that you, in effect, have turned your back on your country. You've had a material change of mind, and that puts enormous pressure on the internal forces within our country, whether it's the family, whether it's the counter-terrorism officials, whether it's the local gendarme. And we have to wrestle with that. We cannot afford to have a 9/11. We cannot afford to have Charlie Hebdo. We cannot afford to have subway bombings in London anymore. And we're going to have to be tough about it. I don't want to, you know, self-radicalize other people. I believe in due process. I believe in the legal systems. But we've been pushed and we've been pushed and we've been pushed. That's part of the goal of terrorists, of course. But I think to the gentleman from Canada who was in the group, you know, I think he put it rather succinctly and rather importantly. We have to be tough, whatever that means, but we have to be, and we have to be resilient.
Now, let me put a final question on this to Mubin Sheikh. Mubin, did you feel at some point that you turned your back on Canada and that now you're back?
After the 9/11 attacks, I should say, sorry, after I left to Syria, I lived in Syria for 2 years after the 9/11 attacks. I did think, you know what, the world is at war now, and you know, Canada is a kuffar state, infidel country, and screw you, I'm going to live in the Middle East. But after spending 2 years there, realizing how good we have as, you know, as minority rights in the West, that's one of the reasons why when I did return back, I started working with intelligence services, because I realized that I had made a huge mistake. So there is space for that. There is space for people to realize that they've made a big mistake. I echo what the FBI agent is saying, that we are going to have to put our foot down and make it very clear. You need to be very deliberate that you are really back on our side.
All right, we're going to leave it there. I want to thank Mubin Sheikh, co-author of the book Undercover Jihadi, for joining us from Munich today. I want to thank as well Haras Rafiq of Quilliam in London, Jack Clunan, formerly of the FBI, now with the risk consultants Red 24 in Florida, and here in the studio being with Christophe Nodin and Thierry Lévesque. Thank you for being with us here in the France 24 debate.